In the world of crime, there are killers, and there are monsters born to break everything we know about evil. 3 men from 3 different countries, from 3 different eras, yet united by one thing: their terrifying ability to kill without mercy and deceive without even blinking. A man who changes his face and identity like a serpent shedding his skin. Another who believes he's street justice, killing those he considers evil. And a third who lives a double life, a quiet, bespectacled teacher by day and a predatory monster in the dark. These are not just murder stories, they're journeys into minds that know no limits and cannot tell the difference between a human being and prey. Stories that moved from the narrow streets of India to the poor neighborhoods of Brazil to the cold forests of Russia and terrified the world for decades. Welcome to Midnight Hour, where mystery is truth and darkness speaks. Please don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a like. Pedro Rodrigues Filho, the Brazilian vigilante serial killer, known as Pedrinho Matador, Killer Little Pedro. Born on October 29, 1954, on a rural farm in Santa Rita do Sapucaí, Minas Gerais, Brazil, Pedro Rodrigues Filho entered the world already marked by violence. While still in his mother's womb, his father brutally kicked her stomach during a fight, leaving a permanent dent in the baby's skull. Pedro would later claim this injury was the origin of his murderous impulses. First taste of blood, aged 13 to 14. At 13, during an argument with an older cousin, Pedro was punched and knocked to the ground. As he lay there, he calmly told the boy, "I'm going to kill you." The cousin laughed until Pedro pushed him into a sugarcane press, nearly tearing his arm off, then pulled a knife. Only family intervention saved the cousin's life. A year later, at 14, Pedro committed his first murder. His father, a school security guard, had been fired and accused of stealing food from the real thief, who was another guard. In broad daylight, Pedro walked up to the deputy mayor of the town, who had supported the dismissal, and shot him dead with his grandfather's shotgun in front of City Hall. He then hunted down and killed the guard he believed was truly responsible, becoming Pedrinho Matador. Fleeing to Mogi das Cruzes, Sao Paulo, Pedro began robbing drug dens and executing dealers. The press dubbed him Pedrinho Matador, Killer Little Pedro. He fell in love with a woman named Maria Aparecida Olympia Botinha, the widow of a murdered drug lord. Pedro took over her dead husband's criminal operations, and when rival gangsters killed Botinha, who was pregnant with his child, he launched a one-man war of revenge, systematically tracking down and slaughtering every member of the rival gang. The most infamous crime. While already imprisoned, Pedro learned that his father, serving time in another prison for murdering Pedro's mother with 21 machete blows, was still alive. In 1973, at age 20, Pedro was transferred to the same facility. He walked up to his father in the visiting area and stabbed him 22 times. 1 stab for every blow his mother had suffered, plus 1 extra. According to Pedro, he then cut out his father's heart, chewed a piece of it, and spat it out. Some researchers doubt the cannibalism detail, noting the father later died of natural causes, but the murder itself is undisputed. Life in prison. He kept killing. Arrested for the first time in May 1973, Pedro was sentenced to 126 years, but Brazilian law at the time capped sentences at 30 years. Even behind bars, he continued his work. He killed dozens of fellow inmates he considered evil, rapists, snitches, and gang leaders. In one chilling incident, while being transported in a police van, handcuffed to another prisoner, Pedro strangled the man to death without the officers noticing. When asked why, he replied, he was a rapist. He spent 34 years in prison, 1973 to 2007, far longer than the legal maximum because new murders kept adding time. Release, YouTube fame, and redemption attempt. Released on April 24, 2007, Pedro moved to Fortaleza. In 2011, he was arrested again for rioting and false imprisonment committed inside prison, serving another 7 years until December 2018. Upon his final release at age 64, Pedro publicly renounced violence. He started a YouTube channel called Pedrino X Matador, Pedro the Former Killer, where he condemned crime, criticized gang culture, and warned young people against glorifying violence. By 2022, the channel had over 250,000 subscribers and tens of millions of views. He married, claimed to have found evangelical faith, and insisted his killing days were over. Death, March 5, 2023. On the morning of March 5, 2023, in Mogi das Cruzes, 3 masked men in a black car opened fire on Pedro outside his sister's house. He was holding a small child in his arms. The child was unharmed. One attacker stepped out of the car and nearly decapitated the 68-year-old with a knife to the throat. The killers fled in 2 cars. The vehicles were later found abandoned, but the murderers have never been identified. Pedro Rodriguez Filho, who officially confessed to 71 murders and claimed over 100, died the same way he'd made so many others die: violently, suddenly, and in the street. His life inspired parts of Jeff Lindsay's Dexter novels. The author has acknowledged the influence and turned him into a dark folk anti-hero in Brazil, a monster who only killed other monsters, until the monsters finally killed him back. Do you think Pedro Rodriguez Filho was a vigilante who punished criminals, or just another cold-blooded killer shaped by violence? Why do you believe someone with such a dark past became a YouTube figure after prison? Was it redemption or manipulation? If you found this story interesting, don't forget to like the video, share it with true crime fans, and subscribe to the channel for more shocking and intense real-life cases. Charles Sobrage, the Serpent, the complete story. Born Hachand Bayonani Gurumuk Charles Sobrage on April 6, 1944, in Japanese-occupied Saigon, he was the son of an Indian Cindy tailor and a Vietnamese nightclub hostess who later became the mistress of a French army officer. Stateless at birth, shuffled between Vietnam and France, he grew up feeling like he belonged nowhere. In Paris, he was bullied for being the little monkey or the dirty Asian. By age 13, he was stealing cars. By 17, he was in prison. Prison, however, never held him for long. He escaped repeatedly, once disguised as a monk, once by drugging the guards with laced birthday cake. In the 1960s and early 70s, he graduated from petty theft to high-stakes gem smuggling, arms dealing, and passport forgery across Europe and the Middle East. Fluent in French, English, Hindi, Thai, Vietnamese, and several other languages, he could become anyone: a wealthy French playboy, a Belgian diamond merchant, an Indian prince, even a photographer for Vogue. Women fell at his feet. Men trusted him with their money. The Bikini Killings, Asia, 1975 to 1976. In 1975, Sobrage, now 31, handsome, charismatic, and ice-cold, moved his French-Canadian girlfriend, Marie-Andrée Leclerc, and his Indian lieutenant, A.J. Chowdhury, launched what became known as the Bikini Killings. Their method was always the same: target lonely Western backpackers on the hippie trail, mostly young, trusting, searching for spiritual enlightenment. Befriend them in Bangkok, Kathmandu, Goa, or Kuala Lumpur. Invite them to lavish parties and rented villas. Slip powerful sedatives, usually a cocktail of Mogadon, Valium, and quinine, into their drinks. rob them of passports, cash, and traveler's checks. Murder them, usually by strangulation, drowning, stabbing, or burning alive, to eliminate witnesses. Confirmed and strongly suspected victims, 12 to 24 in total. Teresa Knowlton, American, 21, drowned in a tidal pool in Pattaya wearing only a bikini, 1975. Vitaly Hakim, Turkish, 25, strangled and burned, body found on a roadside outside Pattaya. Stephanie Marple and Hank Bittinga, Dutch couple, poisoned, strangled, then dressed in swimsuits and left on the beach as if asleep. Cornelia Lena Hemker and Hank's fiancée, burned alive. Laurent Carrière and Connie Jo Bronzich, French-Canadian and American, poisoned and burned in Kathmandu. Avani Jacob, Israeli, stabbed and burned near Delhi. Jean-Luc Solomon, French, poisoned in Goa, body dismembered. And many more whose names were never known because their passports were used by Sobraj's gang. He earns the nickname the Serpent because he could shed identities like skin and always slipped through police fingers. The Fatal Mistake, New Delhi, December 1975. Greed finally betrayed him. In Delhi, he invited an entire group of 22 French tourists to a free gem party at the Vikram Hotel. He drugged them all at once, but the dose was too strong. Guests began collapsing and vomiting in the lobby. One managed to escape and call the police. Sobraj tried to flee disguised as a local guide, but Marie-André broke down and confessed everything. In March 1976, the Serpent was finally caged. Prison was just another stage. Sentenced to 12 years in India's notorious Tihar jail, Sobraj turned the prison into his palace, bribed guards with stolen diamonds, threw parties in his cell smuggled in whiskey and caviar. In 1986, knowing his Indian sentence was about to end and that Thailand still wanted to execute him, he staged the most audacious escape of his life, threw a huge birthday party for the warden and guards, laced the suites with sleeping pills, walked out with the keys. He was recaptured a month later in Goa, exactly as he planned, because the recapture reset the clock on extradition to Thailand, where the statute of limitations on murder had now expired. Released from India in 1997 after 21 years, he retired to Paris, sold his life rights to books and movies, and lived openly as a celebrated killer. The Final Capture, Kathmandu, 2003. In September 2003, drunk on his own legend, Sobraj flew to Nepal to open a casino. A journalist recognized him in a casino. An old Interpol warrant for the double murder of Carrière and Bronzich was still active. Nepalese police arrested him at the roulette table. In 2004, he was sentenced to life in a freezing Himalayan prison. In 2014, the Supreme Court of Nepal upheld the conviction. Marie-André Leclerc died of cancer in 1984. A.J. Chowdhury vanished forever in 1976. Most believed Sobraj killed him too. Today. As of December 2025, Charles Sobraj, now 81 years old, frail, and suffering multiple heart conditions, remains incarcerated in Kathmandu Central Jail. He still gives charming interviews, still claims total innocence, still smiles the same hypnotic smile that once lured dozens to their deaths. The Serpent never died. He just finally ran out of places to shed his skin. The definitive portrayal of his life is the 2021 BBC Netflix series The Serpent, but the real story is far darker than any screenwriter dared to show. If you were in the place of the investigators, what clue do you think should have exposed Charles Sobraj sooner? Do you believe the Serpent was a genius criminal mind, or just a dangerous manipulator who got lucky for too long? If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who loves true crime. The story of Andrei Chikatilo. the Butcher of Rostov. Andrei Romanovich Chikatilo was born on October 16, 1936, in the small Ukrainian village of Yablonnoy, Sumy Oblast, in the Soviet Union. His childhood was marked by extreme poverty and horror. He grew up during the aftermath of the Holodomor, the man-made famine that killed millions in Ukraine in the early 1930s. His family lived in a one-room hut, and food was so scarce that Chikatilo later claimed he didn't taste bread until he was 12. His mother told him terrifying stories about an older brother named Stepan who had allegedly been kidnapped and eaten by starving neighbors during the famine, though no official record of this brother ever existed. During World War II, his father was drafted into the Red Army, captured and wounded. Young Andrei witnessed Nazi bombings, fires, public executions, and hid with his mother in cellars. In 1943, his younger sister was born, possibly the result of his mother being raped by a German soldier in front of him. He suffered from chronic bedwetting, for which his mother beat him brutally, and he was relentlessly bullied at school for his weakness and frequent fainting from hunger. Despite all this, he was intelligent, shy, and an excellent student who loved reading and memorizing poetry. As a teenager, Chikatilo was a model Soviet youth. At 14, he edited the school newspaper, and at 16, he led the local Komsomol, Communist Youth League. But puberty brought a devastating problem: chronic impotence. His first ejaculation occurred at age 17 while wrestling an 11-year-old girl. Every romantic relationship ended in humiliation. Rumors of his sexual failures spread, and he once attempted suicide by hanging, only to be saved by his mother and neighbors. He married in 1963 through an arrangement by his sister to a woman named Feodisa Odnacheva. Their sex life was almost non-existent. He could only ejaculate externally, and children were conceived through manual insemination. They had a daughter, Lyudmila, 1965, and a son, Yuri, 1969. Chikatilo worked as a teacher of Russian language and literature, but his behavior was disturbing. He molested students, entered girls' dormitories to watch them undress, and masturbated in front of pupils. Complaints piled up, and by 1981, he was forced out of teaching. He then took a job as a supply clerk at a factory in Rostov, a position that required constant travel across the Soviet Union by train and bus, a perfect hunting ground. The First Murder, 1978. On December 22, 1978, Chikatilo lured 9-year-old Yelena Zakatnava into a secret house he had bought in Shakhty. He attempted to rape her, but could not achieve an erection. In rage and arousal, he stabbed her 3 times in the stomach and ejaculated as she bled. He then strangled her and threw her body into the Grushevka River. Despite blood evidence and witnesses, police arrested and executed an innocent man, Alexander Kravchenko, in 1983. The Killing Spree, 1981 to 1990. After a 3-year pause, Chikatilo resumed killing in September 1981 and became one of the most prolific serial killers in history. Between 1978 and 1990, he murdered at least 53 people. He confessed to 56, mostly children and young women, though he also killed several teenage boys. His method was always the same. He hunted at bus and train stations, targeting runaways, drunk or homeless young women, and vulnerable children. He appeared harmless, a quiet, bespectacled, middle-aged man offering candy, money, alcohol, or a shortcut. He led victims into forests or secluded areas, tied their hands, stuffed their mouths with dirt, and then entered a frenzy of stabbing and mutilation. He achieved sexual release only through extreme violence. Dozens, sometimes over 70 knife wounds, disembowelment, removal of genitals, breasts, or eyes, and sometimes eating nipples, tongues, or sexual organs. In the early years, he gouged out eyes with his knife, believing falsely that the retina retained the killer's image. He later stopped. Notable victims include Lyubov Berya, 13, his first victim of 1982, stabbed 22 times. Igor Gudkov, 7, his youngest male victim. Tatiana and Svetlana Petrosyan, mother and 10-year-old daughter, people he personally knew. Svetlana Korostik, 22, his final victim on November 6, 1990. The investigation. The official investigation, called Operation Forest Path, began in 1983. Detectives linked dozens of murders but made catastrophic mistakes, extracting false confessions from mentally disabled youths, several of whom committed suicide in custody. In 1985, psychiatrist Alexander Bukanovsky created an extraordinarily accurate psychological profile. A married, educated man in his 40s to 50s with children, impotent, a sadist aroused only by suffering and killing, who traveled frequently for work. Chikatilo was briefly detained in 1984 for suspicious behavior at a bus station, but released because his blood type, A, didn't match the semen, type AB, found on victims, a rare biological phenomenon called paradoxical secretion. He was finally arrested on November 20, 1990, after undercover officers saw him approaching children and women. In his briefcase, a knife, rope, and Vaseline. He initially denied everything, but after 10 days, and after Dr. Bukanovsky was allowed to read him his own psychological profile, Chikatilo broke down. He confessed in chilling detail to 56 murders, leading police to undiscovered bodies. Trial and execution. His trial began in April 1992. He was kept in an iron cage for his own protection as relatives of victims screamed for his death. He behaved bizarrely, exposing himself, claiming insanity, singing, and pretending to be possessed. On October 14th to 15th, 1992, he was convicted of 52 murders and sentenced to death 52 times, plus 86 years for earlier sexual assaults on minors. All appeals were rejected. On February 14, 1994, Andrei Chikatilo was executed with a single bullet behind the right ear in Novocherkassk prison. He was buried in an unmarked grave inside the prison grounds. Andrei Chikatilo remains one of the most terrifying and prolific serial killers of the 20th century, enabled for over a decade by Soviet bureaucracy, secrecy, and incompetence. His case shocked the world when the full details finally emerged after the fall of the USSR. What do you think allowed Andrei Chikatilo to evade capture for so many years? The Soviet system, his intelligence, or pure luck? Which part of this case shocked you the most, and why do you think investigators ignored so many critical clues? If this story shocked you, don't forget to like the video, share it with true crime fans, and subscribe to the channel for more dark and disturbing real-life cases.